But we're going to go ahead and get started here. So for folks, please take a look at the risk disclosures. In short, alternative investments are speculative, illiquid, and investors may lose some or all principal invested. This is not a research report or investment advice. All opinions expressed in this webinar are those of our presenters. Past performance is not indicative of future results. Images containing market data in this presentation are for illustrative purposes only. So welcome to the Arrive webinar. We'll be focusing on the secondary market. Our speakers today are Ryan Frazier, CEO and co-founder, Christina Graub, our staff product designer, who many folks at Arrived investors have spoken to. And then my name is Korin, and I lead our investor relations team here at Arrived. A quick agenda, so folks are all aligned. Ryan will be walking through what the secondary market is, why it matters, and then Christina will jump in to walk through how it works and how to get started. For folks that are new here, feel free to drop any and all questions in the chat. We'll be hyper-focused on secondary market questions today. We do host our standard intro webinars on a weekly cadence. Definitely recommend jumping in those. But with that, I would love to welcome Ryan up to the stage.
All right. Thank you, Korin, and hi, everyone. Excited to give the update around the Arrive secondary market. And really, with the launch of the Arrive secondary market, what we're trying to build is a vibrant marketplace so that investors in the Arrive community can access liquidity and can access investments all across our portfolio of properties. Investors can potentially access investments in over 400 rental properties across 60 cities with this initial launch. And this includes a range of properties from single-family homes, like some of our earliest properties, the Learley and the Soapstone, to vacation rental properties like the Beatbox and the Buyers that investors may want to invest into, even though they're already fully funded. This is really a major step forward in making real estate investing more dynamic, more flexible, and accessible for investors. And for investors who want to exit an investment before the end of a typical hold period, the secondary market offers an early opportunity to sell shares, a level of liquidity that really hasn't been available before within real estate. Whether you're adjusting your portfolio strategy or just responding to new financial priorities, this new marketplace gives you more ways to manage and shape your investments. So really, what makes this different? Traditionally, real estate has always been hard to buy, time-consuming, and a ton of work. And it can be even harder to sell. It's really an illiquid and time-consuming asset and expensive process to navigate actually liquidating a property that you own on the open market. With the Arrive secondary market, we're completely changing that, where this platform introduces a new level of flexibility to directly address one of the top requests that we get from investors. And that's the ability to access liquidity if they need it, but also access a broader list of properties, all of the properties that Arrived has previously funded through our marketplace. So what we're launching with the secondary market is access to quarterly liquidity. So once per quarter, investors will be able to buy and sell shares, providing more control than a typical real estate investing. You can access missed opportunities. So you can now purchase shares in properties that had been fully funded earlier in their initial offering. That can make it easier to diversify across the country, across properties, and also rebalance your investment portfolio. And with the launch, this now makes Arrive the largest residential marketplace for buying and selling shares of rental properties. With over 400 properties across 60 cities, Arrive is really providing an expansive list of properties that investors can participate in. Now, we'll talk more about this as we go, but it uses a market-driven pricing model, which means that investors will be able to set their own buy and sell prices on the marketplace. And ultimately, this just gives investors more ways to adjust their strategy and provide new paths to long-term portfolio growth. So this really means that each offering on Arrive now offers quarterly liquidity options. Whether you are invested in a single family home, a vacation rental property, or a real estate fund, you now have the opportunity once every quarter to access liquidity by selling shares on the secondary marketplace or participating in a fund redemption program. And this is really a foundational shift in how real estate investing works. Um, I think it still makes sense to think about real estate as a long-term investment, but instead of something that you have to feel you're locked up into, you have now more flexibility into how to adjust your portfolio and respond to your own goals as those change over time. So let's take a closer look at how all of this works. So the Arrive secondary market will open for 1 week every quarter. During that week, investors can submit a buy and sell order in any of the properties that Arrived has offered in the past, and that are available for trading. Investors will be able to view property and market information while submitting their orders. And when a buyer and seller match on price, we'll facilitate the exchange of cash for shares through an automated matching process. The experience of using the secondary market will be very similar to participating in the public stock market. Investors can submit buy and sell orders at any time, including on evenings and weekends, but transactions will only happen during market hours on weekdays. And importantly, a share can only be transacted once during a secondary market trading week. So there will not currently be an option for day trading shares that you've purchased or sold within a given trading week. So if you buy shares on the secondary market, you'll have to hold them until the next quarterly trading window. A couple of other kind of important points to keep in mind as well. Once a property launches on our site, it will typically start trading on the secondary market 6 months later in the closest trading week to that 6-month period. We'll also require that buyers be Arrived investors already for at least 60 days in at least one settled trade. This is both to potentially reduce fraud issues and also make sure that participants have at least some exposure or experience with our investments and how they work before they start using the secondary market. And then the last thing to keep in mind is that purchases on the secondary market will be funded from ACH transfers from your connected bank account. This was a decision to maintain the same easy and delightful checkout experience that investors have with our primary offerings. And that means that trades and ACH payments will not match or will not process until a match has occurred. And so you don't need to move money into Arrive before submitting orders. You can participate in the market, wait and see what you match with, and then at that point, an ACH is processed. And with that, I'll welcome Christina. And Christina, I'll let you take it away to get into more of the details.
Thanks, Ryan. So we've seen some really great early questions come in from investors. So I wanted to center this product walkthrough around some of them, and then we'll follow this section with live Q&A. So feel free to continue dropping questions in the chat if you have something that you would like answered live. To get us started, I want to talk about 3 terms maybe you've heard on other platforms used in regards to trading, but they're new to Arrived with the introduction of the secondary market. So I wanted to touch on them before I start using them. The trading window, which you just heard from Ryan, is the 1-week period that the secondary market is open every quarter. All secondary market activity takes place during the trading window. And then building on that, market hours are probably a familiar term from stock market trading. On the Arrived secondary market, they are weekdays from 9:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern during the trading window. And then lastly, you're going to hear me talk a lot about looking for a match and finding a match. This is simply when shares in a buy and sell order meet or match at the same price and a trade occurs. This can happen for all of the shares in your order at once, or you can have a partial match where some but not all shares execute at the same time. So first question you might be wondering, what's the best way to find properties to buy on the secondary market? I'm going to talk about 2 approaches here, and I'm sure as you all start using it, you're going to find even more, and we can't wait to hear about them. So first, using filters can be a great way to discover properties when you have sort of some idea of what you're looking for and want to narrow down on your options. A lot of the filters available on the secondary market should look familiar from our new property and fund filters. And then we have 2 new additions to specifically make secondary market browsing easier, and I'm really excited about these. First is the minimum number of shares listed filter. So this will help you find properties if you maybe have a minimum investment in mind. So if you think that all of our new properties are offered at $10 per share, and you know you want to invest at least $1,000 in each property, you could use this filter to show only properties with at least 100 shares listed for sale. And then my favorite filter here is markets in your portfolio. This is a really great one if you're looking to diversify into new markets, especially ones that maybe we haven't offered in a while. So selecting not owned here will show you all the properties on the secondary market in markets that you don't have in your portfolio yet. And then the last 2 columns in the secondary market table are useful on their own as well as in conjunction with the filters I just showed. So sorting by the shares listed column will help you see properties at the top of the list with the most shares available. You can kind of use this in the same way that you'd use that minimum shares listed filter to find only properties that fit your desired minimum investment. And then sorting by the best available price column helps you bring the best deals to the top of the list as a buyer. This shows you the best price in the order book in relation to the property's arrived valuation and how far above or below it might be. Realistically, I think you'll probably end up using a mixture of both methods to find the right properties to invest in on the secondary market. So then once you have a good list ready to go using filters and sorting, you'll probably need to do a little bit of manual understanding of like the general story of each property. The best place for you to do this is in the property history section, where you can find information on historical dividends, rental statuses, and performance for the entire life of a property thus far. Only you can decide ultimately what you're looking for, but this is a really great place to start. So then on the flip side, how might you determine which properties to sell on the secondary market? First, I just want to say that while the secondary market can offer an optional path to liquidity, all properties are still managed with a long-term strategy in mind. So Arrived continues to hold and sell properties according to their planned timelines based on market conditions. So if selling on the secondary market isn't something you're interested in doing, totally fine. This is really a decision that only you can make. With that said, though, if you're looking to strategically sell properties based on performance, we'd recommend starting in your portfolio. So from here, you can click into single family or vacation rentals and then review individual property performance. Click on a property's name and place an order to either buy more shares or sell shares directly from there. You've maybe already seen there's also a handy shortcut to sell shares from the main secondary market page, but you'll have a little bit less ability to analyze properties' performance when you take that route, so just keep that in mind. Next up then, why are all orders limit orders? The first thing I want to say here is that secondary market trading does not affect a property's arrived valuation, which reflects the value of the property and underlying LLC. This is really important because it differs a little bit from the stock market. Secondary market trading does not affect a property's arrived valuation. So with that said, we use limit orders so that investors have more control over the prices that their shares are trading at, rather than simply executing at the best available price, which could be far from the actual share value. And so we just don't want that to happen, considering that the actual share value is not affected by secondary market trading. So you can think that every time you place a limit order, you're essentially stating the highest price you're willing to buy shares for or the lowest price you're willing to sell shares for. So you might wonder then, can you change your order after it's been placed? And the answer is yes, until it's been matched. So when you submit your order, we will check the order book for matching shares either immediately or when market hours resume. If your shares don't match right away, you might want to adjust your order using market data, which you can do in the Manage Orders area. And again, this is totally up to you. Just remember that your order price is the highest you're willing to pay for shares or the lowest you're willing to sell shares for. So only adjust your prices to thresholds that you're comfortable with, because once a match occurs, the trade is final. So how do you go about setting a price for your order? And again, only you can decide here. So take arrived valuation, market data, trade history, and property history into consideration. All of those data points are conveniently available for you when you click on any property in the secondary market. And for full details, you can always open up a property's original offering page. There's a handy link right at the top of this screenshot you're seeing here. But just keep in mind that the data on that page is frozen in time from the initial launch. So, take it with a grain of salt. So then when you go to review your order, you'll see that we're only giving an estimate of what might be due or paid at match. Why is that? So in the case that a seller is willing to sell for a lower price than you've said you're willing to buy, or vice versa, your order might match at a better price than you submitted. Kind of the rule of thumb here is that everyone gets what they want or better. Since we don't know your final price or how many shares out of your order have matched until the match occurs, the source of truth for your final order total will be in your activity table transaction history. Until then, you will see us refer to subtotals as estimated. And now that we're talking about that activity table, let's go over trade statuses and money movement. When will you see newly purchased or sold shares reflected in your portfolio? So as soon as an order matches, it is final and will populate in your activity table with the status processing. Shares from buy orders will immediately be shown in your portfolio, and shares from sell orders will not move until you're into your closed positions until the trade has settled. That's usually going to happen 7 to 10 business days after the secondary market trading window closes, and you will see a green check mark as the status to denote that the trade has successfully settled. This is very similar to what happens when you buy one of our new properties or funds. And if you've sold any shares, the trade settling is also the moment when you see that money in your arrived cash balance. All right, one last easy question. Where can you find all of this info and more once you leave the webinar, aside from rewatching the replay that we'll send out? We have helpful guides to getting started in-app when you click on Learn How to Get Started on the main secondary market page, as well as a ton of FAQs at help.arrive.com, which is also linked in that in-app Getting Started guide. And with that, that's a perfect segue to transition back over to live Q&A. So I'll go back to you, Korin.
Fantastic. Christina and Ryan, thank you so much for prepared remarks. We've got quite the active chat today, which is absolutely phenomenal. Appreciate our team jumping in. It was interesting to see too, on the poll, how are you planning to use the Arrive secondary market? We had 20% say buy shares, 15% sell shares, 30% buy and sell shares, and 32% just curious. So we've got a mix in here, which is absolutely fantastic. I know we have a lot of questions, so we'll get right to it. We might be grouping like kind together, and then at the end, we'll just ask if we've missed any to make sure all your questions are answered and you feel full confidence one way or the other here. All right, moving back over here. The first one's from Kirk. This is a great one. I tried to buy secondary shares. It said something along the lines of $1,000 maximum. Is this correct? Christina, I will kick this one over to you.
Yeah, so we have a buy order limit on the secondary market of either $1,000 or 2x your current AUM on the platform. And that's really to protect everybody from fraudulent activity. And so that sounds like probably what you were running into there. And this resets every trading window. So that's just for the trading window. And it's for currently open and matched buy orders. So if you want to kind of adjust things, you can edit or cancel one of your orders to kind of rearrange and change things during the trading window.
Fantastic. Kirk, let us know if there's any questions there. I'm happy to go back to it. All right. Griffin had asked, is Arrive considering an all or nothing option as a future enhancement? I understand this adds complexity, but I had a case where I put a buy for 100 shares and got 1 share. The other 99 may or may not get matched, and I don't want to get stuck with a single share. Ryan, maybe I kick this one to you, and Christina, if you have any color there as well.
Yeah. So this is a decision that we made to not take an all or nothing approach. That way investors can, set a price and a volume that they want to buy or sell and allow other investors and other orders to partially match. Part of the reason is that, especially for larger lots, it might be that a number of orders are going to match on the other side to provide you either that full liquidity or provide the full buy order size. And so let's say, for example, you do match a single share, to get your desired in 100 shares, it's possible that you might end up matching another 3 or 5 investors. And I think, for investors who want to monitor that closely and make sure that they aren't, matching a small amount, they can use the pricing guidance throughout the trading week to see where, let's say you're on the buy side, you may be watching the sell side closely to see how you might want to adjust your purchase price throughout the trading week to fully match your goal. And we'll track this closely in the first trading windows that we launch and kind of see how the market behaves. But for now, we think this provides the best quality of liquidity on the market. And so that's the reason why we took that approach.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very well said, Ryan. Moving back over
I'd love to add
here.
one small thing to that, Korin, just that we love suggestions like that. And the product team is always listening. So if you have anything like that you're like, hey, why is it not this way? We love to hear it. So thanks, Griffin.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great feedback, Griffin. To echo Christina, we're always building for and by investors. So we live for the feedback. This is one of the best places to leave them. You saw Alexa, our VP of product, in there too. So feel free to drop any and all feedback that you have. All right. A good one from Todd. I saw this from a few other folks as well. How do you know what price you should ask for when putting up for sale? Christina, I'll kick this to you.
Yeah, I kind of mentioned, really, this is totally up to you. And we're not able to advise on this, but we have provided you with a lot of helpful information so that you can make the most informed decision. So you can take arrived valuation, which is what we currently believe the share's value is based on the property value as well as the underlying LLC. Property history will tell you what's been going on with the property, and dividend history is in there as well. And then also you can use market data. So what other investors are asking. Those are really your best bets for figuring out how to set your price.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great question. I want to move one over here. I think I've seen at least 6 on this one. So there was William, Ryan, a few other folks. Christina, a lot of folks have mentioned that they've owned, properties since at least 2024. We've had folks since 2021, 2022, since inception. They're curious why they're not showing up. So maybe we walk through the phased approach, what that looks like, and how we communicate.
Yeah, perfect. I'm going to pull up my notes to make sure I get my dates right here. But like Korin said, we're doing a phased rollout as the secondary market sort of starts getting up and running, with the eventual plan of having regular quarterly trading beginning at the start of 2026. So this should only be an issue that you run into through the end of this year. And then it's regular quarterly trading for eligible properties that have been owned for at least 6 months. So in this August window that we're currently in, the properties eligible to both buy and sell were originally launched on Arrived through March 2022. This is probably the smallest secondary market window we'll ever have, with just 80 properties. And then next month, which we haven't announced the exact dates for yet, but keep an eye out on your email. We'll announce them as soon as we can. There will be a September trading window, and the properties eligible to buy and sell will have been launched between April 2022 and December 2024. This is a way bigger window than what's happening right now, with about 321 properties included in that. And then starting in November, this is our first regular quarterly trading window. And so all eligible properties, so that's properties that have launched at least 6 months ago, will be eligible to both buy and sell. And that is a full trading window with over 400 properties included in it. So we appreciate your patience as we get this up and running, and happy to hear any feedback.
Absolutely. Yeah. Feel free also to email support@arrive.com. You can use the chat function in the bottom right-hand corner of our platform to echo Christina as well. There was an email on July 18th for subscribed users. That in that email, it says when you can buy and sell. And then I believe there was a follow-up email, keep me honest, Christina, that we had recently when the secondary market opened for eligibility last week. So those are always good reference points, but we're happy to walk through any questions. Keep the feedback coming. We want to make you all feel that you have the details you need and confidence when utilizing the secondary market. All right. I believe we got Ryan here as well with that same question. Matching process. Christina, you chatted through this a little bit live, but if you could please describe the order matching process. Joseph was surprised to see that orders below my offer price were filled at lower offer prices than theirs on Monday.
Yeah, Korin, do you want to pull up that visual again? I had an example order book in one of my previous slides that I think helps to answer this question, just to be looking at, I say real data, but this is for illustration only, but what the order book looks like. So regardless of whether we're in market hours from 9:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern or outside of market hours, which could be from the Friday that the market opens through the weekend to Monday morning or just after 5 p.m. during the trading window, orders always match in order of time placed and then price. So let's talk about this order book as if the market was open. As a buyer, if you're seeing these orders here, you need to place a buy order for at least $11.95 for your order to match. That is the lowest price here that a seller is currently willing to sell shares for. These orders are already on the order book, so they were there first. If you're coming in and seeing them, they're there. Your buy order at $11.95 would purchase up to 120 shares here. If you're a seller and you come into this live order book, you need to place your sell order for at most $11. That would sell up to 100 shares because there's already this buyer on the books who is willing to pay $11 for 100 shares. There's really not a huge reason a seller would go lower than $11 unless they want to buy a large quantity of shares here. Also, no reason for a buyer to go higher than $11.95 here unless they want to buy a large quantity of shares. So that's the main gist of how orders are matching when the market is live.
Fantastic. Awesome. Thanks for walking through that. Always helpful to have a visual. I will say too, Christina, you did a phenomenal job on putting all that together. So very much appreciated.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Moving back over here. Let's see what we have. Oh, I wanted to jump back to Griffin because I believe there was a question relating to the window, Christina, that you just walked through. When you say November window is that all remaining, or are the properties in the current window and September window going to be up again in November?
Yes, and keep me honest here. I want to make sure I get this right. Properties that are currently trading today will not be included in the September window, but then in the November window, it is a true all eligible properties. And that will be the case going forward quarterly.
Fantastic. Awesome. Griffin, let
I
us
saw
know.
another question about why someone's properties were not added to the window. I think, or to the August window that's happening now. Another way to think about it, regardless of the dates that the properties were launched, is that we're adding properties to the secondary market in the order that they were funded by investors on the Arrive platform. And so this August trading window is around the first 80 properties that we launched on the platform. The next window in September will be the next 300 and I think 20 or so properties that we added. And then once we get to November, all of the properties that are eligible to trade will be able to be traded. And that'll be the case on a quarterly basis from there. And so if you don't see a property in this first August window, the only reason is that it wasn't in that first 80 that were launched on the platform.
Fantastic. Yeah. So to think of it, I think in short, is a phased rollout. So let us know if there's any questions there for your eligibility, how we can make it more clear. Happy to walk back through, but appreciate the color there, Ryan. I'm seeing a common theme around fees. It's always a good one to answer live. Pulling the one from Lauren. I know there was a myriad of other folks in the chat too. Ryan, I'll kick this to you. Are there any additional fees, costs deducted from any transaction on the secondary market? As I believe those are already priced into the asset being traded on the marketplace. And then they gave an example here. If I sell an asset executed and filled order at 1025, is that 1025 per share net to me in my account? So I think there's like two things here. What are the fees and where do they go? And then the process of how they're executed.
Sure. So whenever you're submitting an order, you'll see the estimated transaction cost for that order. And for this trading window, the cost per trade is 2%. And that goes to our partners for facilitating the secondary market, our executing broker and our platform ATS. And those transaction costs per trade will be set for each window. It could be up to 2.5%, but for right now, it's at 2% per trade. And so, in the scenario that Lauren had posted here, if it executes and fills at 10.25, then the amount you'd receive in your cash balance would be reduced by 2%.
Fantastic. And then Ryan, any color too on the fees not going to arrive, but directly to the folks that we're working with to execute the trades?
Yeah, so all of the transaction costs go to our platform partners for executing the trades. I mentioned our executing broker and our ATS partner.
Fantastic. Awesome. All right, moving back over here, a good one on leverage. Ryan, I'm going to kick this one to you. How does leverage affect the decision?
I was just going to quickly answer a question that Stephen had posted about transaction costs and whether it'll be included in your gain or loss in your portfolio. And the answer is yes. You'll be able to see the settled price after transaction costs.
Fantastic. Glad you caught that one. Perfect.
And then, sorry, what were you asking on leverage?
There was a question earlier, Ryan, on how leverage might impact a decision. And I'm assuming that's meaning perhaps when an investor is going to place their shares for sale or if somebody should buy. So maybe we walk through the properties that did have leverage versus not and how that impacts an investment.
Yeah. So a number of our properties, especially in this early trading window and early properties that we launched on the platform, have long-term mortgages at fixed rates of between 5 to 10 years. And for the majority of those properties, they're below current market interest rates if we were to refinance that property, because these are mortgages that we maybe entered into in 2021 or 2022 before interest rates went up significantly. And so, those interest rates will be fixed for the remainder of the fixed rate period. So it could allow investors to buy into some of these earlier properties that have favorable interest rates for an additional few years. And so it's something to keep an eye on. We are also working on ways to make that more visible or easier to see for investors, which properties are financed or not. Right now, you can see that on the individual property page. You can see the amount of leverage that's being used and the interest rate. But we're looking to make that filtering easier down the road.
Fantastic. Awesome. I do see a few folks still asking about when properties are eligible at what period. So I dropped that in the chat for folks to take a peek at. Let us know if there's any other questions there. All right, moving back over. Let's see here. Oh, Christina, this could be a good one for you from Gerald. How will these transactions be reflected on new statements? I'm assuming that's our monthly account statements.
Yep. Yeah. And really, you shouldn't see too much of a change. You'll see these transactions, or I should say, once your order matches, that becomes a transaction. And that's what you would see on your statement as well as in your activity table within your account. You will not see orders that you place that are unfilled in either of those spots. And that's just because we know people are placing a lot of orders. That generates a ton of noise. But if that's something you'd love to see, definitely let us know. But yeah, on the statements, you'll see any trades that occurred based on the orders you placed on the secondary market. And if you've sold shares, you'll see all the correct information about gain, loss, net return reflected on the statement accordingly.
Fantastic. Awesome. I see a good one in here from Steve. I believe in prepared remarks, we had walked through a little bit of how we mitigate any bad actors on the platform or things that can take place. So Ryan, maybe we walk through the safeguards that we have in place, given that privacy and security are our number one priority at Arrived.
Yeah, and this was really a consideration for the Arrive platform. And I think that the comment came up when we were talking about we currently require that an investor be signed up and an active investor on Arrive for at least 60 days before entering the secondary market. And the main thing that we're looking out for there is just a seasoning timeline for connected bank accounts to make sure that ACH payments settle. Because there can be up to a 60-day window where that could potentially cause an issue. And so we're waiting to make sure that the connected bank account has fully settled, and then that is what's dictating the 60-day timeline. This also might be something that we don't require down the road, but for now, it's something we're being cautious around as we launch the secondary market. One of the reasons is because the way that we are executing matches and funding those matches is through an ACH payment instead of requiring investors to deposit money into the platform first. We think that that's an ideal experience for both buyers and sellers, that they can actually submit orders more freely without tying up those funds until there's actually a match. But to do that, we have to be certain that the connected bank account is real, for lack of a better term. And so that's really what we're focused on right now, and why we require that it's a confirmed account before entering the secondary market.
Fantastic. Awesome. Always a good question to ask. Another good one from Steven in here. Will you figure out our gains and losses, long and short, based on the price we bought sold, since we didn't buy an initial offering? Brian, I'll
So for in investor portfolios, you'll be able to track the purchase price you paid, net of transaction costs, and the price at which you sold, net of transaction costs. And investors can use that to calculate their cost basis and their gain and loss.
Fantastic. Awesome. And it looks like we've had a few more questions come in on fees. So I just want to double down on these. Brian had asked, are both buyer and seller charged a 2% fee? And then Kirk had said, on a buy order, should we add 2%? Like I want to buy $10, so $10 and 10 shares, $10 at 20 cents.
Yeah. So the transaction costs are both to the buyer and seller. And for this trading window, they're at 2%. Those transaction costs go to our third-party partners for facilitating trades. Even though, this is a secondary market that arrives launched and on our platform, we're required through the SEC and FINRA to have these third-party partners to facilitate trades. And then for investors who want to, make a bid, or they want to execute at $10, you don't have to add incremental, you don't have to adjust your order prices at all to be inclusive of those. During the checkout window, when you're submitting an order, you'll see that those are added or reduced from your order total. And so the trade or match will execute at the order price that you put in. So if you put in $10 during checkout, it'll automatically show you that it estimates it would add this additional 20 cents. If it matches at $10, it could match at a lower price. And then similarly on the sell side, if you submit an order to sell at $10, it could match at a higher price, but assuming it matched at $10, then it would automatically reduce the 20 cents from that matched order.
Fantastic. Awesome. Thanks for walking through fees, Ryan. Let us know if there's any color there. Hopefully that answers the questions that came through the queue. All right. Moving back over here. Do you show anything equivalent to open interest in terms of orders placed for a property on secondary market? Christina or Ryan, do you want to take that one?
I can take this one.
Perfect.
Essentially, the place where you'd see that today is clicking into a property and looking at the open market data. And so like interest would be the buy orders. How many people are looking to buy shares of this property? And in future windows, you'll see us adding new features to help you tell that at a glance from just looking at the table. So we're really excited to get those in there, and love hearing that you're looking for it, because that's kind of our thinking as well, that it would be super helpful to see that at a glance. But right now you'll open up a property and take a look at open buy orders.
Fantastic. Awesome. And I believe I shared this one in chat, but we can take it live really quick. Hopefully we instill confidence in Angela on where to look for shares. Can you show or walk through, Christina, verbally how they can find the quantity of share per investment when going to use the secondary market?
Yes. And I'm assuming that this means how many shares were initially offered for the property, you think?
I believe
Yeah.
so. So I would give
Okay.
I think an example, like you've invested in the Christina, the Ryan, you have 10 shares in each. Where do I see that in my account?
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Let me start sharing my screen and I will walk through how to do that. Bear with me
Incredible.
1 second.
We get a live demo. Those are always the best.
All right, here is a live arrived account. So I'm looking at the secondary market right now. If I want to take a look at shares that I own, I'll click into my account to see my portfolio. And then let's say I want to sell single family shares. This is also a great place, like I mentioned earlier, to check out and analyze your performance on these properties, and make a decision if you want to strategically sell or maybe strategically also buy more shares of a certain property. So you can scroll left and right on this table. And then if you click on a property's name, you'll see the history for the property. So dividends paid, lease renewals, all sorts of things. And when the market's open, you'll see a buy and a sell button here. So if you decided you wanted to sell the soapstone here, you could click sell and sell directly from here. You can see the market data, see recent trades, and submit your order right here. And this is, I would say, our recommended way to do this if you want to strategically sell. The other place where you can do that is in the secondary market and click sell shares. You'll see all of your properties that are eligible and how many shares of each property are eligible. A situation where you might have like 5 of 10 shares eligible here, or if you added shares of a property you already owned, you bought more of those on the secondary market. Like Ryan said earlier, no day trading on the secondary market. So shares you bought in the current window are not eligible to sell in the same window. So hopefully that answers your question. If not, chat in and we'll get you the right answer.
Absolutely. I was like say to Angela, if you go to your account and then like Christina mentioned, click on single family or click on vacation rentals if you have those, and then it will show all of your properties on the right. You can scroll over to see your shares per property there before you're in that eligible window too. Because I'm assuming that you're not in this window, so it's a little bit it can be tricky finding that. So let us know if there's any questions there. All right, moving back over here. A good one from Liz. We can filter by properties owned, but can't filter out those I have an open order on. Is there a way to filter these out? Christina, I'll kick that to you.
That's a great suggestion. And I could see that definitely being something we add for future windows. This is exactly the kind of feedback that we love to hear. And yeah, right now we don't have that ability, but definitely something we could add going forward.
Awesome. And it looks like we have Steve C in the chat, which is phenomenal. Can we get information that might help us identify problem properties being offered? So they want to filter out vacant properties, returns, et cetera. What are your thoughts, Christina? A little bit similar along the lines with filtering.
Yeah, I'll just share a little anecdote that the secondary market team got together very early on in person and talked about all the filters we would want to have. And so I love seeing investors suggest these because they're things that we also would love to see. This is another great one, to be able to filter on property status or even like property event within property history. And I already saw Alexa drop it to the team behind the scenes. So definitely something we would consider in the future.
Fantastic. Awesome. All right. Moving back over here. A good one on how to work within the platform. So do we have to update our buy sell daily? Christina, I'll kick that to you.
Yeah, I will say you don't have to, but if you haven't seen a match occur, definitely go in every day and take a look. You'll get an email when a match happens. And so if you haven't seen an email and you're waiting for a match to occur, there are definitely scenarios where, let's say you're a buyer and you really want to buy shares of the soapstone, there might be a seller 10 cents away from you and it's worthwhile to you to change your order by 10 cents. You would have to go in and check that. Again, that's something in the future we're kind of trying to figure out, how to notify investors of that. But right now, go into the market data and you can go into your manage orders and open your order and see the market data from there, and review it. And so this really depends on how motivated you are to buy or sell shares of a certain property, in terms of whether you have to or you should check it every day. If you're highly motivated, definitely would recommend.
Fantastic.
If we go back to Lauren's question, all of the orders are good until canceled during the trading week. And so you don't have to resubmit orders every day. If it's still open, it will be good for the entire trading week. And then at the end of the trading week, it would be expired.
Fantastic. Thanks for catching that one. And it sounds like we've had a little bit of technical difficulty with a little box showing above a question. If anybody's seeing that, just refresh. I had to do it on my side too. Apologies for that. Hopefully that's not blocking any other questions that we have. And like Brett said in the chat, we'll be sure to send the recording out to all folks as well, just in case you had to refresh and miss a few seconds there. All right, moving back over here. Can I queue up an order for future window in case I want to set a stop loss or stop gain type if I decide an exit strategy for a property? Or do we need to submit an order only when window opens? Sometimes it's easy to be busy in that 1 week when the window opens up. Christina, I'll kick to you.
Yeah, I totally hear that about being busy. But you do have to submit your orders for the current window during the current window. And this is Friday to Friday. So you could jump in Friday when it opens and we're accepting orders, but they're not matching yet. You could jump in Monday or Tuesday. And the reason for this is that we update arrived valuations quarterly. And so we really want investors to be trading with the most up-to-date share value data. And so we would hate for someone to place an order way ahead of time and then we change the arrived valuation and suddenly you're trading on this outdated order you placed without the latest data. So that's really the reason for that.
Fantastic. Awesome. Sounds like that refresh is working for folks. Thrilled to hear, and thanks for your patience there. Christina, jumping back over to the account statement, Stephen is asking, following up on the response to loss gain question, when we buy, sell the property, will you not report gain and loss on tax forms?
I might pass this one over to Ryan for better on taxes than me.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we'll follow up on the specifics of the question if you have specific questions on exactly how that will work. But ultimately, we'll still provide investors with the data to complete their taxes at the end of the year. And so you'll have that information available. But if there's a specific, I'm not sure if there's a specific thing that you're looking for in terms of what would be reported, but the data to complete your taxes after the sale of a property will be included annually when investors receive their 1099 statements, which is typically within in the month of January following the close of a calendar year.
And a way ahead of time plug, we do usually run a taxes webinar. Korin, maybe you're about to say that, but we will definitely be revisiting that webinar before we run it with updated secondary market information.
Absolutely. Christina, you took the words right out of my mouth. That's typically, Stephen, I know you know this already, but in January, right around when those tax forms are distributed. So stay tuned. To echo Christina, though, we'll have an FAQ out in the wild so you feel confident on what will be on which tax document. All right, moving back over here. I believe there was another one on fees. This is always a good one to ask, Ryan. We know that folks have a myriad of different ways to invest, different ways, liquidity options. Do you think that Arrived envisions these third-party transaction fees being reduced in the future?
Yeah, it's certainly possible that the fees can change, and they'll be set for each trading window. Right now, the transaction fees can be up to 2.5% per trade per side. For this trading window, they're 2%, and we plan to maintain that. And we'll, look to make sure that we're creating the best value that we can for investors with our partners. And as the marketplace gets larger, hopefully there's opportunities to do that. So there's things that we're looking into to support that, but nothing available yet.
Fantastic. All right, moving back over, a couple questions, Christina, on the windows. Do we plan to announce the future windows that we have ahead of time? And I would add, how far in advance do you envision?
Yeah, for sure. So our plan going forward, and of course, there are times things don't go to plan, but is to announce the exact dates for each window at least 1 week ahead of time. And so on the Friday before the market opens for orders, we'll let you know like in this case, we'll send an email and make sure it's also on the your arrived account when you go to the website and the app. And we'll say, hey, secondary market trading is coming up next week from 8/1 to 8/8. Right now, you can preview the properties that are eligible within that window. So that week will really be your time to take a look at which properties are trading, start to get familiar with their property history and which ones you might be interested in buying or selling. And then the market will always open for orders the Friday before matching begins on Monday morning.
Fantastic. And one more from Angela in here. And I know we're getting close to time, so I believe this is one of the last ones I saw in the queue. So keep me honest if I missed any others. Want to be sure all your questions are asked and answered. Christina, do open secondary positions refresh every quarter?
Yeah, I think this is similar to the one about placing an order ahead of time, for the same reason that we want investors to be using the most up-to-date share value data. The secondary market orders will be canceled at the end of each trading window, and you'll need to place new ones when the new trading window opens. And again, this is really just to make sure that you all are trading with the most accurate and up-to-date arrived valuation data.
Fantastic. And Megan, I saw you mention that none of your questions are answered. My apologies. Keep me honest in the chat which ones were missed. We're happy to stay on the line and make sure those get answered. I know in the queue can get a little busy, so definitely not ignoring. Moving back over here, Christina, they're asking, can you text that the secondary market is open as well? Good question.
Say less. We can definitely do that. We're trying to balance right now what the right amount of communication to people is with this first window. I feel like we don't want to be annoying, but we also want to make sure that everyone knows that it's happening and has a chance to get in. So totally adding text to our list. Thanks for the suggestion, Megan.
Absolutely. Great feedback. We always appreciate what modes of communication work best. Text is my favorite too. Another one in here from Megan. How does this compare to the 5-year window with arrived that was initially discussed when we bought in? There are no fees for that, I believe, but how are shares sold after 5 years? So I know if I want to wait 2 more years or not. Ryan, I will kick this one over to you.
Yeah, so this is referring to the anticipated hold period for each property. And it could be 5 years, it could be longer. Our investments team is really evaluating each property independently to decide, when's the right time to sell in the open market, the entire property, and distribute proceeds back to investors. And what they're really trying to do is for investors be mindful of what might maximize effective annualized returns or IRRs for investors. And so we're always kind of having that evaluation, especially as we approach that initial 5-year mark, and then would continue to review on an ongoing basis. There's no transaction cost for a property that's sold being distributed back to investors, but there are selling costs associated with that. So, for example, real estate agent fees may be involved, or closing costs may be involved. And so there could be additional costs related to selling a piece of real estate on the open market. And so, hopefully that answers the question on the 2 different paths, whether trading through the secondary market, if you want to sell shares earlier, or if you want to wait to the end of a hold period until a property is sold.
Fantastic. Kirk, I saw you might be having a technical difficulty. We definitely want to help you in terms of matching those sell orders. So feel free to send an email to support@arrive.com. Kara, our associate product manager, will be able to help you, or you can use that chat function in the bottom right-hand corner of our platform. All right, moving back over. Megan had also a good point here, and maybe it's a good time to walk through Arrive valuation. Part of the reason I want to sell my properties, I have a relative in Denver who's a real estate agent, and property valuations have been increasing at a quick pace the last few years, but my Denver properties have lost value. I've never understood it, but after 3 years, I don't want them any longer, as I don't feel like they're growing in the local market for some reason. So it's a great thing to walk through live.
Yeah, happy to answer this one. And I think in general, thinking about using the secondary market as a way of rebalancing your portfolio or exiting some properties and entering into other properties is a great way to think about the market. Specific to the Denver properties, in a scenario where perhaps property values have gone up, but an arrived estimated valuation has gone down, the one thing to think about is that property value is one component of the arrived valuation. It's also by far the largest component, but there are other components to the arrived valuation as well. And the arrived valuation takes in all of the assets and liabilities of the LLC that owns the property. And so if a property price has gone up, but an arrived valuation has gone down, it's likely that the cash balance of that LLC has gone down. And the reason is typically due to an operating issue. So perhaps there was a tenant turnover that led to maintenance or renovations on the property that needed to be invested ahead of a new tenant cycle. Or maybe there was a long vacancy period where the property incurred costs like taxes and insurance and utilities. So there could be operating expenses that lower the cash on hand in that property, that lowers the valuation, even if the property value has gone up. And sometimes that can be more magnified if a property has leverage as well. So I just want to respond to how those things might, work, not always be directly in tandem. All of that said, though, the property values are typically, and that trend line is typically a good indication of, where those arrived valuations will go if a property is stabilized. So once it has a stable, long-term tenant who's and the property is performing as expected, then you should expect that those arrived valuations will typically move alongside property value changes.
Fantastic, Ryan. Thanks for walking through the level of depth. Megan said that was helpful, which is great to hear. Curious too. I think we had one in here from Linda too, Christina, that I will kick over to you. When is the secondary market going to start to buy shares?
Yeah, so right now, all investors who are eligible to participate in the secondary market, I know this was mentioned way earlier, but investor eligibility is based on the date of your first settled transaction on a new property or fund. So as long as you have been an active investor for at least 60 days, you're eligible to buy shares on the secondary market right now, as well as in September and November and all windows going forward. So definitely take a look. I know there are a lot of open orders right now. And also every morning at 9:30, it's been fun to watch lots of orders matching. So thousands of orders have already matched. Definitely jump in and take a look and see what you might want to buy.
Fantastic. Awesome. I know there was a mention here of talking about cash reserves. Ryan, do you want to walk through how that works?
Yeah. So every property, whenever it's funded on arrived, also raises a small cash reserve that gets held in a bank account in the name of that property's LLC. And that cash reserve can be used to do things like paying annual expenses like taxes or insurance that then amortize over a year. It can also be used to fund property maintenance or property improvements. If we end up, if a property ends up needing more cash for something like that than is available in the reserves, then it also may take on short-term financing to fund that. For example, let's say it needs a new roof replacement or something like that. Then it may take on some short-term financing to fund that. That cash reserve is part of the balance sheet, the assets and liabilities of every individual property. And so it could influence the arrived valuation as well, beyond just the value of the property.
Fantastic. Awesome. And I know there was another question here on how to exactly sell shares. Excuse me. Christina, do we want to do one more mini demo of it just before we close our virtual doors so people feel confident?
Let's do it.
Fantastic.
Let me get my screen up here again. Question was just walk through how to sell shares.
Yeah, they're just looking for exact steps.
Sure can. All right, again, we're in my live secondary market account and two ways to do this, but I'm going to go the way that I would recommend doing it. So go into your portfolio, which is up here under account, and then navigate to either single family or vacation rental properties. In the current window, there are no vacation rentals eligible. So I'm going to jump into single family. In future windows, all of our vacation rentals will eventually be eligible. And here are all the properties you own. And so for properties that are eligible to trade during this window, you can click on the name of the property right here. Again, see all the property history and choose to buy more shares or sell. I recommend going this way because this table is really the best place for you to judge performance of these properties before you decide to sell. So take a look at everything in this table. It scrolls left to right, and then you can click on a property name to sell from there. I'll finish out this flow and then I'll just say 2 other places that you can go to sell. So you can click sell, and let's say I want to sell shares of the soapstone. What you should do here is review all the data. So the arrived valuation, the yield at the arrived valuation, open market data, and you can see all of that. We're showing you the highest 3 buy orders and the lowest 3 sell orders. But if you click view all, you can see the full order book, and you can also switch over to see trades that have happened during this window already. So that kind of gives you an idea of where investors are transacting for a given property. So use that data, use your position data, gain loss, dividend data. I haven't held this share for very long, so that's why it probably looks different. If anyone on here owns a soapstone, probably why it looks different. And again, property history. So this is for the entire history of the property. You can see what's been going on. Use all that data to decide where you feel comfortable putting your sell price. And just remember that the sell price you enter here is the absolute lowest you'd be willing to accept for shares. So if you want to sell, we default this to the closest to the arrived valuation that we can get. Orders are always priced in 5-cent increments. So you can see the arrived valuation of the soapstone is $24.33. This is defaulted to $24.35 for you. You can type, you can go up and down by 5-cent increments. Find a price that feels comfortable to you and decide how many of your shares you want to sell. I only have one, so I can only possibly sell one here, but this will be defaulted to the number of shares that you own already. You can see your estimated subtotal, and then you'll click review sell order. You can review how many shares you selected, the price you selected, that cost that Ryan talked about, and what we estimate your payment will be at match. And again, this is estimated at this point in case not all of your shares match, or maybe a buyer is willing to pay more than you said you're willing to sell for. So this is estimated at this point. And then you'll click submit sell order, and it'll join the market data and be part of the order book. I can't do that because I'm an arrived employee. Arrived employees cannot participate in the secondary market, but you'll be able to click submit and your order will be live. And then I do want to call out where you can see that order and change price, change quantity. If you head back into the secondary market, there's a button here that says manage orders, and you'll be able to click on that and you'll see all of your open orders. So right now I'm on buy orders. Here I'm on sell orders, and a helpful hint for in this view is clicking on only show editable orders. And again, this is not super helpful since I don't have any, but that would filter to only show orders that are actionable that you can edit or cancel. So it kind of reduces the noise for you in this view. And you can also get to this view in the email that we send you when you place an order. And then I was just going to call out the last 2 places you can go to sell. When you click sell shares, you'll see all your properties that are eligible during the current window. But like I said before, not as much like analysis possibility here. And then in your portfolio, there's a sell button here as well. You can use that. So hopefully that helped, and it's fun to do a live walkthrough. My team who worked on this is just fantastic, and I want to shout them out because it's so cool to be able to demo this live for so many investors on a webinar.
Absolutely. To get not 1, but 2 live demos in one webinar is absolutely exceptional. So Christina, thanks for walking back through it. Hopefully that instills confidence when folks are going to buy or sell, and outlining that eligibility there too. There was some feedback too, Christina, with filtering. Steve had mentioned a search of property name might be useful rather than scrolling. I believe there was one other one in here. Can you add a filter searchability based on some property criteria to filter out which owned property shares to sell? The table's too long to scroll horizontally, especially when I have 15 plus properties. Just wanted to get your quick gut reaction and thoughts.
I love it. I'm sure my whole team is going to be stoked when I come back and say, everybody wants filters. I know a lot of them are on this webinar too. So we're all seeing the feedback and we hear you loud and clear, more filters, which is super exciting. So stay tuned because we're always building buy-in for investors. And so we love hearing this feedback and really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah. We love the feedback here. All right. Moving back over. I think we have 2 questions left in the queue here. I'll move one back over on the theme of valuations from Martin. Are there any plans to create a method to review detailed data on each property that affects the valuations? Martin had shared specifically with repairs were made that created a drain of the cash reserve for a property, any increase of insurance premium, a renovation different from the typical tenant turnover repairs, etc.
Yeah, so the best place to find these details is on the property history timeline for each property. And you can get to that property history timeline through the secondary market or on the individual property page on the performance tab and click view property history timeline. And that'll give a history of each of the arrived valuations, the dividends, and typically if there is any sort of significant expense or change in operations, we'll include a text input of the details. So that's the best place to track that information. And over time, we look to continue to add, more and more detail of what could have been a factor if there is any, potential changes to the operating history.
Fantastic. All right, moving back over. I think this is the last question that we have before we close our virtual doors. It's from Steve. Ryan, I'll kick it over to you. The eSphere shows a valuation of 1303, yet the div paused 15.6 from valuation, then started at over 15 initial valuation. Just wanted to gather thoughts here. If we need to take it offline, we can too.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, feel free to reach out to support if you have more questions. The eSphere started at a share price of $10, and its last valuation was $13.03 when looking at the balance sheet of the property. So all of the assets minus the liabilities. The asset side would include the property value and the cash reserves, and then the liabilities would include things like a mortgage if a property is leveraged. If a property stops paying dividends, then the property history timeline is the best place to see what could have changed with that property. For example, in the eSphere, recently went through a lease renewal process. And so that could be part of a factor that could impact a dividends being paused. Typically, if there's a lease renewal or a property is not rented, we'll pause paying dividends until it is rented and the property continues to generate rental income. So then we'll restart dividends once it's re-rented and we start receiving payments. Additionally, you can see on the eSphere that there was a higher property tax cost in the most recent property tax renewal. And so that also was impacting the expense side of the operating performance. But you can find out more through the property history timeline, and that's true for really all properties. But great to just chat through an example here with eSphere. And if there's more that I didn't touch on or additional questions you have, please feel free to reach out to support.
And then there's one thing I want to touch on from that question. It's the minus 15% from valuation. I'm going to screen share one more time. It's just so fun.
We get a third demo. This is awesome.
Third demo. Let's do it. Okay, so this is live market data. In our slides it wasn't, but we're looking at live market data here. So I have the eSphere here, and this is where that minus 15.6% from valuation and the question was coming from. Mm-hmm. What this is actually showing you here is the best available price for you as a buyer. So if I click into the eSphere, you can see the arrived valuation is 1303. Someone's willing to sell 100 shares at $11. So what that column is showing you is good deals for you as a buyer. And so you could come in here and place a buy order for $11, buy these shares for lower than arrived valuation. So that's really what this column is showing. So I'm sorted by it by default. I love using this column to find essentially good deals. And so you can see on this end, these are shares where the sell order is higher than the arrived valuation, but sorting it so that you're seeing the low end shows you the best deals where you can buy shares for lower than arrived valuation. And if you see any, let's see if I can find an example, lots lower than arrived valuation here. So good deals to get in on. Yeah, so this one is being offered right at the arrived valuation, 0% from valuation. That's because the arrived valuation is an increment of 5 cents. So yeah, looks like people are selling at $17.25 right at valuation. So that's what that column means there. It can be really powerful for buyers looking to get in on some properties.
Fantastic. Awesome. Thanks for walking through it, Christina. Third time is always the charm, even though your charms run 1 and 2 as well. I think we had a few more questions in here. I know we're over time. Ryan and Christina, is it okay to go for 2 more before we close virtual doors?
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah.
All right. Moving back over here. Ryan, I'll kick it to you. Do you foresee using AI, ML insights to into property valuation projections or suggestions on what limit price to use based on history of orders for the property, local market, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, love to see the feedback and the way people are thinking about the market potentially expanding over time. And I think there's a lot of things that we may consider in the future. We haven't anticipated launching something like that, but we are looking at launching or adding more ways to see the trend in property value updates and the trend in arrived valuations and dividend performance over time, just so it's easier to see that visually outside of the property timeline. And then we'll continue to take feedback and make improvements to the marketplace quickly.
Fantastic. Yeah, great question. One more in here. Ryan, I'll kick to you from Ron. Are unamortized fees at purchase, like real estate agent fee, also included in the valuation?
Yeah, so any of the costs that were part of like launching and funding a property on arrived when we initially bought the property and set it up for operating as a rental. For example, maybe we did initial improvements to the property to prepare it to lease. All of those upfront costs are amortized into the arrived valuation over the life of the initial hold period. And I think we can paste another link to the arrived valuation FAQ to show, which does talk through how the arrived valuation is estimated, the third-party valuations that we use for the property value, and then just what goes into the arrived valuation. So we'll post that link in chat as well, which is a more fulsome response. But yeah, thanks both for pasting that in.
Absolutely. All right. I think we have one more. I keep saying one more, but I think I really mean it this time. So we'll take one more in the queue and then we'll close our virtual doors for today. One from Steve. I assume properties are listed by the time available. Is there a sort option to get to the right property I'd like to view? Kicking this to you, Christina.
Yeah, I'm going to assume this means in the portfolio. I'm reading this as properties eligible during the current window. And I think this is a great learning, at least for me, from this webinar, that if you own a ton of properties, it is a little hard to navigate in your portfolio to properties that are currently eligible during the window. So definitely something we'd like to improve in the future. The best way to see your eligible properties for the current window is on the main secondary market page. Click sell shares and you'll be able to see exactly how many shares of each property you own are eligible within the current window. Keep me honest if that's not exactly what you meant, but I'm going to read it that way.
Fantastic. Awesome. I think we cruised through all the questions here. Absolutely phenomenal engagement. Before we close our virtual doors, Ryan, Christina, any closing remarks for today?
Yeah, I'll just say thanks everyone for joining, for all of the great questions, and for spending time with us live. And Korin and Christina and our Arrive team, thanks for all the engagement in chat and running us through the show here. And we'll see you all next time.
Fantastic. Well, Yeah, Christina, Ryan, thank you so much for your time and prepared remarks, for answering the diversity of questions, for you and all of the folks in chat for spending an hour 16 on your Tuesday morning, afternoon, evening. It's absolutely exceptional, not normal. A huge shout out to our Arrive team, all the work in chat and behind the scenes. I know folks see a few faces within these webinars, but no, we have a whole host of folks making things happen based off your feedback and everything that we hear from you all. So happy investing. If any other questions come up regarding the secondary market or any at all, feel free to email support@arrive.com. Use that chat function in the bottom right-hand corner of our platform. Our subreddit is live and active, so feel free to jump in there as well. But happy investing and hope you have a great rest of your day.